who does not love, he who does not agape, does not know God. Agape love is an evidence in our life that we belong to God. We must remember this. And know here, the term know means to experience. Do you experience God in your life right now?
Amen.
Maybe you haven't been experiencing Him lately. Well, ask yourself this. How have you been treating your Christian brothers and sisters lately? This may be a factor, but it doesn't replace the question, how is your relationship with God lately? That's the first question that we have to ask ourselves. We are then presented to make this choice. Again, it's a commitment. It's a choice on how to treat others. Do you have a genuine regard, care, and concern towards the person next to you? What about the person behind you? Or the person in front of you? Do you have genuine care and concern towards them? What sets agape love apart is when the feelings fail, or when it's not there, you're frustrated and you don't feel like dealing with that person. Agape love chooses to still treat that person lovingly, even when it's hard or it's difficult. Agape love enables us to respond differently to enraging circumstances. It will seek to reduce the potential of frustration and give us the humility to communicate and address the issue appropriately and, more importantly, biblically. It says in 1 Corinthians that love never fails. Feelings may fail. You may say you don't have the energy, or you may be so reluctant to show that someone that you actually care for them, or you love them, or you even respect them for that matter. But the actions and the choice to love is present in agape love. It challenges our thinking. It challenges us to set aside ourselves. It challenges us to set aside our pride. This is the love of God that is calling us to. We have to be careful also not to discriminate who to love. John doesn't say, just love the ones that you get along with, guys. It's all the more that we should actually commit to love those we don't get along with, because that's the distinct feature of agape. It doesn't discriminate who to love. Can I just highlight this thought, that it's impossible to achieve this on our own? It's easier said than done. And when I look inside myself, during those tough times that I've encountered with fellow Christians, when you're right in the middle of the conflict, and I personally reflect and the thoughts that cross my mind, and as I search deep within myself, all I see is pride. When I have that thinking and reasoning it out to myself, yeah, I may have done that, but they've done this. He has done that. She has done that, and that's worse. It's not about that. It's not about that. Deep within us, there's brokenness. Being reluctant to show humility and putting God aside first, just so that we can say or do what we want to do in the first place. And then God slaps us and wakes up to His reality. Happens a lot to me. But sometimes the damage has been done towards your fellow Christians, fellow brother and sister, to your family, if I may remind you. James 1:19-22 gives us practical instructions around this, how to treat others. So then, my beloved, let every man be swift to hear, be slow to speak, slow to wrath. Are we practicing this? For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. We can't do it on our own strength. So we need to remember verse 7. Love is of God. He is the source of agape love, and we can only genuinely love others, move on from and resolve our conflicts and misunderstanding with others, and set aside that deep-seated pride that we have by being in an active relationship with God first and foremost. Are you connected to your life source, which is God, the one who has agape love?
Amen.
Is your relationship with God active? We're close to Him because we devote time, spending time in the Word and also prayer.
Yeah.
In this way, God reveals Himself, and He reminds us that He demonstrated His love, His agape love towards us. If we love God, we love God's. If we love God, we love God's. We cannot love Him and not love what is His. His family, His people. Look around. If we love God, we love God's. So we need to allow God's agape love to define and influence our relationships. Can I continue? Yeah? The demonstration of agape love. Uncle C.S. Lewis here says, God allows us to feel the frailty of human love so we can understand the strength of His love. On our own, once again, we can't fully grasp and demonstrate true, unfailing, sacrificial love. It's through God's Word and our experience with Him as we submit to Him can we really understand and apply it in our lives. It all starts with our relationship with God. And I'll just keep saying that because that's what it's all about. 1 John 4, verse 9. This shows the extent of how true love goes. In this, the love of God was manifested, was demonstrated toward us, that God has sent His only begotten Son into the world that we might live through Him. You guys know John 3:16, right? Most of us know that. For God so loved some people. No. For God so loved the world, each and every one of us, that He gave. He gave, God gave. Through our difficulties with others, we need to look beyond and above ourselves for that solution, which is God. In God, there is no selfishness, there is no pride, and there's only self-sacrifice. There's always humility, and there's giving. God gave. So look to God when you have problems, first and foremost. God demonstrated His love to us by sending His only begotten Son into the world. Do you guys realize where it says here, only begotten Son? I just want to, focus on that at the moment. That there's two subjects here, okay? God the Father and God the Son. God the Father, when I was meditating about this on this passage, about God the Father's love shown in this passage, I thought of my unborn baby. I thought of my unborn baby. We're having a baby girl, and praise God for that. But RB and I have prayed for a baby, and God provided in His own timing.
Amen.
And many times we've said that prayer that, God, we dedicate this baby to You. Sometimes it's actually easier said than done because I'm left with this thought that how would it feel for me to give up my child for the sake of something or someone? If God tells me that now, that where He brings a circumstance that we may not have this baby, how am I ready to accept this? How am I ready to obey God? How much more for you guys who are parents in this room? The thought of giving up your child. Think of God the Father. He gave up His Son for us, for our sake. When we're sinning against Him, it's not that we're perfect. It's when we were sinning against Him, when we were offending Him, He gave up His Son for our sake. All of this that we might live through Him. The psalmist David pens in Psalms 8, when I consider Your heavens, the work of Your fingers, the moon, the stars, which You have ordained. What is man that You are mindful of him? What is man that You are mindful of him? God is so great that He created all of this. But what is man? What is man that you are mindful of him? I ask myself, would I give up anything for my child? Yes, I would. It's an easy answer. But what about this? Would I give up my child for anything? For anyone? For God? You just can't help but stop and ponder about God's love for us. He is love.
Amen.
God the Son. God the Son, Jesus left heaven for us, for you and me. Jesus experienced poverty. He was ridiculed. He was punished. He experienced the cross so that we can have life. In Romans 5:8, while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. That's how far true love goes. True love really goes to great lengths for the sake of the one being loved. Verse 10. And this is love, not that we love God. It's not us that initiated it, but that He loved us and sent His Son to be the propitiation for our sins. John is reminding us of our love relationship with God, that it was Him who initiated it, not us.
Amen.
In 1 John 4:19, if you look at that, it says, we love Him because He first loved us. This is what we need to understand, that God's love is so deep for you and me, that He sent His Son to be the propitiation. Do you guys know what a propitiation means? If I put it plainly and simply, He took care of our sins. He took care of all of it. He was the substitute for our punishment. God does not love you because you are lovable. He loves you because He is love.
Amen.
God does not love you because you are lovable. He loves you because He is God.
Amen.
His love is not based on the evaluation of your good works.
That's right.
He's not there saying, okay, you did this, okay, I'll love you. But you, not so much, so I won't love you. He doesn't love like that.
That's right.
So to wrap up, God initiated. God did not discriminate. But the last point here, look at it. God gave His best. God gave His only begotten Son.
Right.
That's how God demonstrated His agape love for us. Look at 1 Corinthians 13 with me on the screen here. We've always considered this as the love chapter. You know, we use this verse and refer to this when we define or describe love. But in light of what we touched on just now about Jesus, how about we read it this way? Jesus suffers long and is kind. Jesus does not envy. Jesus does not parade himself and is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek his own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoice in the truth. God is just. As what we talked about, God is holy. He does not rejoice in iniquity, in sin. God is judge. There is justice. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And the last part there, Jesus never fails.
Amen.
Just remember that when Jesus was crucified on the cross, we have this picture of Him suffering. In that physical moment of pain and agony, what did He do? He looked at the Roman soldiers who actually crucified Him, who spat on Him, and said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. Forgive them. It's that kind of love operating in our lives today. We may be offended and hurt to the core, but we look to God and pray about our issues. Do you pray to God about our issues, or only when we're so down? We look to God and pray for people we're having difficulty with, and just focus on having an active relationship with God. A vertical relationship with God first. before horizontal relationships. How we respond to tough times reveal who we really trust and who we really look up to.
Amen.
Think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
What is the status of your love this morning? Is your love marked with the sign of love of God that has for you? How He showed us first. Is it about how to better your career or whatever? Or is it serving others? Are you pouring your life out to other people? Are you maturing in the presence of God through His Word and fellowship with others? These are questions that God has presented to myself, to my life as well, when I was preparing. And it was hard. It was hard. But we have the greatest example to follow.
Amen.
He is asking us, this greatest example, Jesus, do you love me? Jesus is asking you today, do you love me? He is asking us as well, who do you say I am?
Yeah.
Who is He in your life? Not what others say. Who do you say Jesus is in your life?
Right.
Moving on to verse 11. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. If God so loved us, we also ought to love one another.
Yeah.
John is just very repetitive. It just reinforces the idea, right?
Right.
But it just makes it really important. That's what it signifies to me. He can't be repetitive and just say love, love, love one another. He says this because this is really important. So my question, IBCC, do you love one another?
Amen.
Think of our church. Do you love one another?
Yeah.
We often quote John 3:16, but I want to encourage for us to look at 1 John 3:16 as well. It says here, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. 1 John 3:16. By this we know love, because He laid down His life for us. And we also ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. Are you ready to lay down your life for the people in this room? Also, even for fellow Christians outside this church.
Yeah.
It all starts with the small gestures. You know, you don't have to wait for that someone to be in so much tragedy that you offer help. How sensitive are we for the needs of others in this church? Do we even pray for one another? Do we even pray for one another? Just as simple as that. Lay down your life for your brethren. This is the proper response to God's agape love. Our response to agape love. It's important to understand God's love. It's well and good that we understand and have the knowledge about the love of God. But you know what's more important? It's for us to respond to it. What is your response today? Do you allow God's agape love to define and influence your every relationship? Verse 12 is very significant. It says here, no one has seen God at any time. If we love one another, God abides in us, and His love has been perfected in us.
Right.
No one has seen God at any time. What does that mean? Seen here means the physical side. After Jesus ascended from heaven about 2,000 years ago, no one has seen Him ever since. How do then people know about God's love? What does God's love look like now? Well, it says here that it's through us. They see God's love.
Right.
We are witnesses to who God is. And I think we should really consider that we are representatives of God, His love. So as a church, are we doing this? Are we pointing people to God by our love for one another? It's not about how big our building is. It's not about the instruments that we use for worship.
Right.
It's about how we treat each other, that people see God's love. John 13:35 says, "By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." This is an undeniable calling for us. Love one another. You know, it's funny, at one point, just an example, life example, when I attended a conference, perhaps one of my co-workers saw how I interacted with a fellow Christian, because there was a fellow Christian that was in the conference as well. They saw, or they probably, they saw how we spoke to each other, how we spoke about each other with other people. And one of my co-workers jokingly said, "Oh, the brethren. Look at you two. You guys are the brethren." It's kind of like a derogatory way that, he said it. But it may have been delivered in that sense, but you know what? I'm happy. I'm happy that that's how he saw us. That we're distinct. How people see us, how we love each other. I'm happy because the seed, it has been planted on that person. That we are, even though that, that remark which also said that, "Oh, that's why you're like that. Oh, that's why you're different." Are we afraid to be different in our workplace? Are we afraid to stand out in our workplace? I'm not saying this to brag, but it's actually to show that God can use anyone for His purpose. If you know me before, when I was youth, when I was in school, I was afraid to tell people that I'm a Christian. So I acted like I wasn't a Christian. The interactions, the relationships we hold and keep tell others about our belief, and most importantly, our commitment to that belief. At times you may not be in a spiritual height. You may not be close to God right now. We fall short, but we must remember that it's in those times of failure that we must realize all the more that we are loved. And we use that as the fuel to get back up and to wake up from our spiritual laziness. Think about God's love for us. Think about the things that we just talked about. Did it convict you? And it's the same account, or it's in the same process as well when people fail us. In that context of loving one another. When others fail, let us down or hurt us, and we show love and grace. When we bear with one another, when we forgive one another. Colossians 3 tells us to bear with one another and forgive one another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. So let me ask you this question, and we need to realize this. If God has forgiven me, if God has forgiven us a lifetime of sin, how can I hold on to several sins one has against me?
Amen.
If God has forgiven me of a lifetime of sin, how can I hold on to several sins one has against me? Who are you in conflict right now? Maybe you need to reconcile with that person. Because it's easy to just push away and run away from the dramas and the difficulties in life. But let me ask you, did God push away and run away when you were being difficult? When you were difficult? When you were a Christian? Did He say, "Oh, yeah, you're just messed up. See you later"? God didn't say that. He sent His Son to die for us.
Amen.
So we don't run away. We persevere like Christ persevered for us, unto us. The world will only know us in how many people in this room. Again, not with the instruments or how we worship. It's how we treat others. It's how we treat each other. Verse 12 also talks about God's love has been perfected in us. Perfected. What does this mean? That we are we're just all white and, no sin, holy? Perfected means we are being complete.
Yes. Amen.
We are being made whole. And can I just say this, that it's a process. It's not an overnight thing. but God has perfectly loved us. And that's something that we need to put in our minds, that God has perfectly loved us. Christ declared on the cross that it is finished, that we have a way, we have the way to a relationship with God. But it doesn't stop there. Once we're Christians, I'm saved, I'm not going to do anything. All the more that we need to look at being perfected by God. The process of being made complete. The process of being made whole. No one's going to do that for you. Not pastor, not your teachers. Our relationships, it works two ways. God has reached out to us. What are you doing to nurture your relationship with God? I want to jump to verse 17 to 19 here. And I want you guys to really focus on this. It says here in verse 17, love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment. Because as He is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear.
Amen.
Because fear involves torment, punishment. But he who fears has not been made perfect in love. We love Him because He first loved us.
Amen.
Do you realize that fear is mentioned 4 times in this passage? It's not talking about the fear that we normally talk about, the reverence or the respect towards God. This is fear placed with, it says, torment, punishment. So this fear talks about the fear of the day of judgment in verse 17. And this is something that I've been so pressed to actually share to you guys today. This is one thing that I really want you guys to think about. There will one day we'll all be judged. There will be a day when Jesus will come back on this earth. In the same time that God is love, God is just. He will bring justice to the world. And He will judge those who love Him. He will judge those who don't. Do you love God?
Right.
Those who don't love Him or won't accept Him as His personal Lord and Savior will be left behind in this earth and go through what it says there, torment. And at the end of it all, cast out into hell forever. Not for one day, not for 5 years, forever. Does that make you uncomfortable?
Right.
So rightly so, because there is fear and trembling to those who have not accepted God as their personal Lord and Savior. John is then assuring, if you remember the context or the purpose of why he wrote this book, he wants to assure Christians of their salvation. There is nothing to fear when you're a Christian. Do you guys realize that? There is nothing to fear when you're a Christian. We have confidence before God. We have assurance about our salvation because as Christians, we have been perfected in the love of God.
Amen.
He who here fears the future, the fear of the unknown. Right? We tend to worry. The end times is something that we should put in the forefront of our minds. It will come. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Amen.
Are you ready? As Christians, are we preparing ourselves? Are you living in Jesus' love, or are you living in fear?
Right.
For the world, there's that inevitable fear of dying. But for believers, God doesn't want us to fear. God doesn't want us to doubt or tremble. He wants us to have full joy and assurance. And there's only one solution to that. It's to receive the perfect love of God and apply it in our life. Have you received God's perfect love in your life?
Amen.
How about this? Are you sure of your salvation? Perfect love casts out fear. Can we all say that? Perfect love casts out fear.